Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Depende kung anong oras niyo pinapanood tong video. Nakikita siya. Okay? So, I hope you have watched the first video I made. It is already posted in MVLE, an introduction of our course. Now, let's go to chapter 2. Chapter 2 deals with force vectors. So in chapter 2, we will be learning how to solve for the resultant of forces using different methods. We can also solve for the components using different methods in two-dimensional and three-dimensional force systems. So the first topic would be scalar and vector quantities. I believe you already know what is a scalar or what is a vector quantity. Okay, kapag scalar, ano sabihin ng scalar? Quantity that possesses a magnitude only such as mass, volume, length, and time. So kapag walang direction yung quantity, that means scalar yon. So parang kayo, no? Nag-aaral kayo sa MMSU, free yung tuition, wala kayong direction sa buhay. Ang tawag sa inyo ay scalar ng bayan. So scalar, so walang direction, yun lang naman ang difference nun sa vector. Merong magnitude and then direction. Okay, so mostly sa ating discussions later on, we'll be dealing with vector quantities, especially forces, no? Since we'll be dealing with forces, we should try to understand kung paano mag-simplify, mag-solve ng resultant ng mga forces, at the same time, paano kumuha ng components ng a certain force. Okay? So, let's define, ano ba ang force? Wait lang, meron pa palang ibang topic. Multiplication and division of a vector by a scalar. So, how do we multiply vector and scalar? So, since we'll be dealing with forces, so usually forces are represented by arrows, ano? So, yung magnitude ng arrow, kung gaano kalaki yung arrow, ganoon din yung magnitude niya. Okay? Halimbawa, itong force A, ito yung magnitude niya is A, ito yung length niya, the length represents the magnitude. Kung mas malaki yung magnitude, mas mahaba yung arrow. So if you multiply a vector by a scalar, for example, yung scalar 2, multiply natin na sa vector A, so twice of letter A of vector A, that means lalaki yung length ng arrow. Okay? Twice yung length. Now, if we multiply it by a negative scalar, so mag-iiba yung kanyang direction. Okay. So, negative 1 times the vector A, that would change the direction of vector A. Okay? So, that's it. Yun lang naman. Force. Ano ba ang force? A force represents the action of one body on another and is generally characterized by its point of application, its magnitude, and its direction. For example, sa engineering, we usually represent the action of one body to another body with a force. For example, we have a box resting on the ground, so we can represent the weight of the box. I-represent natin yung weight ng box with a certain magnitude of a force. So yun na yung ating So we represent yung action ng box dun sa may ground or floor. I-represent natin yan using an arrow, force, to simplify the system. Yan. Ano pa yung mga forces? For example, wind, yung mga natural forces such as wind, no? So how do we represent yung force acting on the wind? On the structure pala, yung wind acting on the structure. So we convert those actions into an equivalent forces. For example, another is yung weight natin occupying the building. For example, tayo, nag-occupy tayo ng building. So when we analyze the structure or the building, we represent our weight and the weight of other materials present on a structure using forces. Yeah. So, ang goal natin sa chapter na ito is for us to master kung paano mag-resolve ng forces. Yung maraming forces, gagawin nating isa lang. O yung isang force, gawin nating marami. So, solve natin yung mga components niya. So, kailangan natin yon later on sa yung mga succeeding major subjects for us to simplify the analysis of structures acted upon by different types of forces. Yeah. So ito yung foundation ng mga major subjects natin sa civil engineering. Okay? So how do we add or subtract forces? So, again, I think I've told you before sa previous video that you need to review mga basic mathematical principles natin, algebra, because we will be applying those principles, trigonometry, yan, especially trigo. Okay, so addition, vector addition. Okay, finding a resultant force. So when we say vector addition, the other term for that is actually we are solving for the resultant force of a certain force system. Okay, so how do you solve for the resultant of a certain force system? We have several methods. First, we need to discuss yung first method natin, which I think you have discussed before in physics. No, kasi a portion of your physics, I don't know, physics 1 ba yun? Or engineering physics is mechanics, ano? So, ayan. I hope you can still remember the mechanics part of your physics subject before. So for example, we have a two-force system. May tayong dalawang force A and force B. Force A and force B. We need to solve for the resultant of these two forces. So when we say resultant, ang ibig sabihin yan, yung napakaraming forces. So yung, for example, in this case, we have two forces A and B. Gagawin lang nating isa. Okay? So, yung isang resultant force na yun, the same din yung action niya, okay, dun sa body or particle acted upon by those many forces. Okay? So, importante alam natin mag-solve ng resultant force to simplify later on yung analysis ng structures, yung napakaraming forces, gagawin lang natin isa na. Okay? So, first method would be the parallelogram method. So, how do we anong gagawin natin sa parallelogram method? I hope you have your modules with you. Nandun yung step-by-step procedure kung paano natin gagawin yung parallelogram method. But let's just briefly discuss in this video. Okay. So, number 1, okay, first procedure is drawing muna natin yung mga forces. Ayan, force A and force B. Okay? Next is to draw. Okay. Again, importante na medyo scaled yung pag-drawing natin ng length ng mga forces. So kapag mas malaki yung magnitude ng force B, dapat mas mahaba siya compared dun sa force A, ano. So para mas accurate yung drawing natin ng parallelogram. Okay? So second is to draw, wala akong ibang parallel lines. So from the head of force A, ito, from the head of force A, you draw a parallel line relative to force B. So drawing natin, sana straight yung drawing ko. Ayan, okay. Ayan. So parallel siya sa force B. Next is you draw a parallel from the head of force B, sa may arrow. You draw a parallel line relative to force A. So drawing tayo parallel, hindi na siya parallel. Ayan. So itong line na to parallel siya dito. This line is also parallel to force B. Okay. So since parehas lang sila ng length, same direction, same length, that means yung force na to is also, ayaw sumulat. Force B, ito same din yung length niya sa force A, same direction. So this is also force A. Ayaw nang sumulat ng blue. Okay? And the resultant force is actually the diagonal. Ito yung resultant force natin. Okay? Ito yung resultant force. Okay. So, mayroon na tayong parallel. Basically, we'll be drawing parallelograms. That's why it's called parallelogram method. So, ganun lang kasimple. So, mag-drawing lang. So, from the head of force A, you draw a parallel line sa force B. And then, from the head of force B, you draw a parallel line relative to force A. You draw the diagonal. The diagonal would be the resultant of the two force system. Okay? So, the resultant then, so, pag nag-add tayo ng vectors, A plus B, ito na yon. So, hindi siya literally na ina-add ito, Ayan. So, the resultant is equal to, so you can choose, since parallelogram ito, you can isolate any of the two triangles. Ayan. So, you can choose to isolate itong upper triangle or the lower triangle and analyze yung triangle using trigonometric functions and then solve for the resultant force. So, given yung angles natin dito, let's say this is angle beta and this is angle alpha. Or you may choose to isolate the upper triangle. Ayan. So this is the resultant force. This is force A, force B. Since parallelogram to, if this is angle beta, this is also angle beta. So the resultant using cosine law is equal to square root of a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cosine beta. Ayan. So we given yung two sides and included angle, we will use cosine law to solve for the resultant force. Yung isang side ng triangle ito. Ayan. Gamit tayo ng cosine law. So ganun lang. So please try to review your trigonometry, especially yung right triangles, cosine law, sine law. Yan. Okay. If you have questions later on, you may post on the comment section. Comment na lang sa comment section sa YouTube yung questions nyo, or you may also raise your questions sa group chat natin or sa MVLE. You can message me dun sa MVLE. So if you have questions, or maybe I will schedule after this chapter, I will be scheduling an online meeting with you in case you have questions before you have your long exam. Okay, so a separate video would be uploaded for the illustrative problems, mga sample problems natin. So see you sa next video.